Friends, it's a pleasure for me to have my daughter Leora here. And she's a rabbinical student in Israel, and I love hearing what she has to say about everything, but especially about Judaism. And I don't want people to say she's great, that she's got it from me. She's gotten nothing from me. She's gotten everything from herself and her own learning and her own study. And I'm inspired by her, and I'm proud of her, and let her share some Torah with you.
Dear friends of the New Reformed Temple, it is so lovely to be here tonight celebrating Shabbat and the end of Pesach, the holiday of liberation, with you. I have been blessed to fly into Kansas City from Israel for this occasion and feel grateful to my father, Rabbi Landi, for inviting me to address you this evening. For me, family time is sacred. Sometimes it's exhausting and as intense as can be, but it's also exhilarating, precious, and rarer an opportunity than we'd like it to be. With great distance and a pandemic that separated us for far too long, I don't take this time for granted. In the weeks before our trip, my young children literally counted down the days until they would come to America, as they say with their heavily Israeli accents. And when we leave, I suspect that they will count the days until we come back. Whether counting up or down, time creates a framework for our lives. Moments in time mark what we'd like to hold on to, and also what we'd like to distance ourselves from. Counting time allows us to breathe in the small moments and also to gain perspective. And I bet that if you think about it even for a second, you can easily pinpoint those formative memories which serve as chapter titles for the story of your life. It is natural to count from one event and date to the next, as it almost intuitively tells us what is important and what is not, what sparks excitement and anticipation, and what fills the pits of our gut with anxiety and dread. Our tradition knows the importance of counting time and making time count. And right now, as the festival of Passover comes to an end, some of the Jews in the world are in the midst of a 49-day journey of ritual counting called the Counting of the Omer. It's a counting from Passover, second day of Passover, to the holiday of Shavuot. It traditionally marked the agricultural calendar from the barley harvest to the wheat harvest. But this time also marks the space in the distance between two places, between the exodus from Egypt and the receiving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, essentially marking the space between liberation to revelation. In those 49 days, the people of Israel were physically freed from servitude for the first time in over 400 years. But on the 50th day of their journey, they stop and camp at the foot of the mountain, awaiting to take in spiritual freedom as well. I suspect in those 7 weeks, the people were neither able to accept freedom nor revelation. How could they, when for centuries they didn't think that they had no one to count on? How could they when they had nothing to count down to or to anticipate? How could they process the sudden miracles that they had experienced? Does the Torah really believe, though, that transformation only takes 7 weeks? If the Torah had spark notes, the quick answer would be no. In fact, during those 7 weeks of the beginning of their desert journey that took eventually 40 years, they incessantly complained about the food, the water, and conditions following the miracles that happened to them. But the 13th century Spanish rabbinic text called Sefer HaChinuch, the Book of Education, the anonymous author explains that since the acceptance of the Torah was the goal of our redemption and serves as the foundation of the Jewish people, and through it we achieved our greatness, we were commanded to count from the day after the first day of Passover until the day that the Torah was given. This manifests our great desire for that awesome day which our hearts yearn for, as a servant yearns for shade. We count constantly, when will the day come that we yearn for, the day that we left slavery? Because counting toward a certain date shows a person that all his desire and longing is to reach that time. Meaning that, in a sense, we count because doing so gives a framework to our lives. It motivates us to move from point A to point B. It inspires us to refrain from stagnation. It inspires us to grow, to move, to long for, to desire, to change, and to even fall. And while the Omer is a set time to reflect on that space and that journey between 2 points, the notion of transformation of any sort is daunting, especially when it is forced. Thus, the Omer is a time to also remember that between those miracles, there was also emptiness, where they made that vast time and space count. In all honesty, I've never succeeded in counting the entire 49 days, nor have I particularly tried. But I do take this opportunity of intentional counting to account of where I am, what I am doing, where I am going, how I go about in this world, and where do I want to go from here. And I encourage you to make space for that counting as well, whether now or whenever you need. I encourage you to count the space between and the people in your lives. I encourage you to both wait for and to wait for it to pass. And in that reflection, I pray for you to find personal liberation and exaltation and inspiration between point A and point B, whatever that may be for you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.